One of the best ways to receive consistent and high dividend income, especially within the past couple of years, has been through covered call or derivative income ETFs. And one of my favorite things about covered call ETFs is how frequent some of their dividend payments are, with most of them at this point paying out every month, and a few of them paying out as often as every week. And some of these covered call ETFs, especially the newer ones, have without a doubt very attractive dividend yields, with a handful of them being over 50%. Now, the problem with these ultra high dividend ETFs paying 50, 60, 70% yields is that their NAV inevitably falls over the long term in order for them to continue paying out these massive yields. But with that being said, there are a lot of covered call ETFs out there that don't really experience any NAV decay at all. In fact, a lot of them continue to grow each year on top of their double-digit dividend yields. So we're going to cover a few of those ETFs today, starting with the first one, which is QQQI, or the NAOS NASDAQ 100 High Income ETF. So right off the bat, we can see that with the exception of a couple of months in early 2025, the NAV hasn't really fallen into a negative return, but has rather held up a 1.22% year-to-date return. Of course, that is not including dividends, but it shows that it has not had any NAV decay so far this year. QQQI is currently paying just under a 14% dividend yield, so its total return so far this year is a 10.8% return, outperforming the S&P 500 by about 1 percentage point. Now, QQQI went live at the very beginning of 2024, so we don't have too much data on its past performance, but if we look at its 1-year return, it still outperforms the S&P 500 pretty significantly. So as of right now, I personally think that QQQI is a very powerful monthly dividend ETF. Now, if we look at its expense ratio, it's definitely not on the lower end, but not crazy high either. It's at 0.68%, which is ever so slightly above average. But with an ETF paying monthly dividends with a double-digit annual yield, to me, that expense ratio doesn't bother me too much. Which brings me to the next one, which is very similar to QQQI, especially since they are issued by the same firm. This is SPYI, or the S&P 500 High Income ETF. So again, very similar to QQQI, with the exact same expense ratio at 0.68%, and a slightly lower dividend yield of just under 12%. Now, the biggest difference between the two is that SPYI obviously is selling those call options and collecting premiums on the S&P 500 rather than the NASDAQ. So even though the dividend yield is less than that of QQQI, the movements in the NAV for SPYI are going to be a lot less volatile. Now, when comparing SPYI to the S&P 500, their returns are going to be almost identical, but the difference, of course, is that with SPYI, you're getting about 90% of your total return paid out in monthly dividends rather than only capital growth. Now, looking at its dividends, it's been paying an average of around 49 to 52 cents per share, and it's been paying a consistent monthly dividend for 3 years in a row now. So it's had a lot more of a track record when it comes to consistent dividend payments, but that's simply because it's a couple of years older. This takes me to the last one, which is one of my favorite monthly dividend ETFs called GPIQ, or the Goldman Sachs NASDAQ 100 Premium Income ETF. So this one has less than a 10% yield, but also experiences essentially no NAV decay, plus more capital growth with a year-to-date return, not including dividends, of 3.37%. Now, one of the reasons why GPIQ is my favorite covered call ETF right now is because it recently surpassed my now second favorite dividend ETF, JEPQ. Looking at the 1-year chart, GPIQ has a 21% return, whereas JEPQ only has a 16.45% return. Now, these two ETFs not only sound the exact same when you're saying their names, but their strategies are also extremely similar. So we'll see if this trend of GPIQ outperforming continues going forward. Its expense ratio is also on the lower end. It's below average at 0.29%. It's also an increasingly growing ETF. Its AUM recently surpassed 1 billion, and it's currently at 1.4 billion. So it's definitely getting more and more popular as the years go on. It's also another pretty new ETF. Its inception was back in October 2023, but since then it's had some pretty significant returns, especially for a dividend ETF. So let me know what you think of these 3 dividend ETFs that experience little to no NAV decay, and I will see you all next time.